Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.
Okay, so we are the morning after probably the most caustic, probably the highest rated presidential debate ever, I'm guessing, for all the wrong reasons.
Exactly. All the wrong reasons. Oh, my goodness.
So,
it was such a train wreck.
I didn't watch it. I saw snippets.
Yeah.
It was enough. So I didn't miss anything.
You did not. Unless you like torturing yourself for 90 minutes.
No, I'm not a masochist.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I did watch last night, and at times I was watching through my fingers. I was watching with my hands over my ears. It was intense.
That
bad? I would have to say, yeah, it was pretty bad.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were. There was very little actual discussion of topics, issues, problems, policy ideas, right? It was more about name calling and fear mongering and shouting over each other. It was like watching kindergartners on the playground at times. I felt,
So, being a communications expert, this is probably everything you should not do for effective communication.
Yeah, right. If you want to actually have a conversation with someone and come to mutual understanding, build a strong relationship, this was not the blueprint for that at all.
So, would you say also, from what you witness or what you observe on social media, are they just echoing how we're operating as a society, especially in social media now?
I would say, yeah. To me, it feels a little bit like a feedback loop, because when a public figure like that sort of behaves the way they behaved last night, their followers pick up on that and echo it, amplify it on social media, and then I'm sure the public figures are tracking the response on social media, and they're seeing the likes go up, they're seeing the comments, and so they think, okay, I got to keep doing this, or I got to step up my game and take it even to the next level, because I've got to keep these folks engaged. And so I feel like it's this never-ending cycle and a downward spiral, to be honest. I don't often see the conversations getting elevated, right? They're often devolving into name-calling, absurd rumors, complete lies, and it's all about getting, for me, eyeballs, and I call them earballs, people listening.
Right.
So any attention, even if it's for the wrong reasons, in a social media saturated and focused world, is good, right? Any attention is good in that kind of landscape. So, yeah.
There's so many avenues to go down, and I don't want to take you down a rabbit hole because it take you off of the concept of communication. But it's like Mick Jagger said decades ago. He said, "Say whatever you want about me, just spell my name right." So the essence of bad publicity being good publicity probably goes back centuries, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But we've just never been in an environment where an anything goes kind of mentality is there from a caustic or slander or pot shots, or maybe, I don't know, verbiage you'd hear on the schoolyard kind of thing. That was never acceptable.
Right.
And we are in an environment where pretty much anything is acceptable now.
Yeah. It sort of feels like anything goes, for sure. And everybody has access now, which is also different from decades ago. Everybody can have a Twitter account. Everybody can hop onto Instagram and say whatever they want. Right? Not everyone used to have access and sort of a platform or a microphone before. And so now people which is, on the one hand, which is good. We've seen social media used for good,
Right.
In other countries, for instance, where revolutions have started and democracy is, people trying to take democracy into their halls of government. But here in America, it just seems like it's all about getting that attention, and we're drawn to the negative more than we're drawn to the inspirational or the aspirational stories that they're out there. People are sharing those things, but they don't seem to get the same level of attention and focus.
They don't resonate. My fear is, and I'll put the cards on the table from my perspective. And I'm talking just style. We're not here to talk policy, not to left or right, because we've never seen we've never seen a major politician, let alone a president, who has no problem with doing schoolyard tactics verbally. Right. And it isn't about arguing the degree of what he is doing. It's just that if you go back and watch the 2012 debate between Mitch Romney and President Obama at that time, and there was a lot of policy differences there too, and both sides were heated because both men did not conduct themselves in a caustic fashion like you witnessed yesterday. The discourse, as I remember it in 12, was not at the same vitriol level. So I get it. It's speared by the candidate, or the candidate itself can really spear in society, and that doesn't even mean politics. That can happen, right? Any kind of leader of any organization can end up, their demeanor can end up reflect on the entire organization. Is that right?
I feel that way.
Okay.
Yeah. We look to those folks as the examples, and they set the tone, I think. And the folks who are their supporters or their followers or their acolytes, this is how we're doing it now. Okay, great. And they get in line and mimic and mirror what they see the leader putting forward. So yeah, I feel like, I know politics have always been heated, and at times there have been some low blows, some underhanded tactics. Not everyone has been
choir boy or girl.
Right. Yeah, not everyone has been super civil,
Right.
But I feel like over the past 4-6 years, it's just really taken a turn for the awful. Just not even being willing to entertain another viewpoint, another idea, just to get some perspective or some ideas that might be helpful to consider. There's just this automatic assumption that just because you identify as this party or this party,
we crave that identity, don't we? As
we
a public,
do.
Why?
Yeah.
I am literally, not that I'm special. I just lay back from that, and I'm astounded of the what they call it, identity politics, or you wear your like
tribalism.
Yeah. Like when I was young, you didn't talk about who you voted for. I mean, if you did, it was a private one-on-one conversation, maybe a lunch table, but you didn't wear it as a badge outside of the couple people that were involved with local politics.
Right.
And that was always odd to me. Like I would, as a kid especially, you'd see Jimmy Carter for president, but you just didn't see that stuff. It was a private matter.
Right.
It's not anymore.
Right. Well, I feel like the whole tribal aspect of this, identifying with a group, is amplified by social media, and I feel like it's indicative of how disconnected so many of us feel. We want to belong somewhere, and if we feel like we identify, with most of what this group believes or some of what it believes, and then we can be a part of that group, we can be a part of something. Okay, I'm going to sign up and be that. I'm going to join that tribe, right? And do what it takes to belong to that group. I think it all comes back to that idea of feeling like I belong somewhere. Some people care about me. Some people want me to be around.
Are we getting less of that now, you think?
I feel like it's harder for people to be connected and feel connected to each other, even though we have these devices that were with us 24/7, and we're always checking. And on one level, we are more connected than we've ever been to more people than we've ever been connected to, but it's the quality of the connection, I think, that isn't necessarily feeding us the way we as human beings need to be fed by the relationships in our lives. If we have 1,000 friends on Facebook, are they really our friends? You know?
That's a good point.
And so I feel like people are searching for that identity and that tribe to belong to, and we're kind of going about it in the wrong way.
Yeah, there's so many avenues there. I just remember being a younger person and reading my first Anthony Robbins book, which was interesting.
Oh yeah.
But one of the great things he said early on was, and I'm sure he got it from Jim Rohn or somebody else prior to him, but the comment was so good. He said, the quality of your relationships is directly related to the quality of your communication.
Ah, okay.
And for a younger person, that just was like, wow.
Yeah.
I look at it now, I'm like, well, of course it is. But you look at it back then, it was so impactful. And that statement never left me, because I would look at adults, being a young person back then in a workforce, looking at them being caustic toward each other. And I'd say, wow, I'm like, they don't like each other because they don't even try to understand each other.
Yeah.
It was pretty apparent at a young age. And of course, as you get older, you realize that I'm just guilty as everybody else, especially in the environment. And with that in mind, the quality of relationship that we have with each other, and sometimes it's a virtual relationship, which I don't even know how, as a specialist, you even maneuver that.
Yeah.
But is that mantra still true, even though we're not physically with people? Like, I don't know, we're not in the same room with them often. This is a rarity. Sitting and talking with another human being is a rarity.
Right.
So is it different, or is it still the same in terms of managing your relationships?
I think it's the same.
Okay.
Yeah, because if we're not able to communicate effectively with the people in our lives, whether that's face-to-face, virtually, on the phone. Who talks on the phone anymore, right? But
kids don't.
No, my daughter, she's 11. We've been trying to teach her how to use the phone, because this is a skill you should probably have in your toolbox, right? But we think, but maybe she and her generation are moving phone free, right? You know, they're not going to have that experience. So yeah, which kind of blows my mind. But yeah, I absolutely think the quality of our communications impact the quality of our relationships and the nature of our relationships and the strength of the relationships. That's often why I'm brought in to work with folks. I do a lot of trainings around the idea of communication, because folks are struggling with that. They're working on a team, but there's conflict, there's disagreement, which is totally natural and normal. You get two people together in a room for any length of time, they're going to disagree about something, right? So it's not that we're trying to eliminate that difference or disagreement from folks happening. It's going to happen, but it's how do we navigate that once it occurs, right? Are we going to put up our walls, put up our defenses, go back to our tribe who thinks the way we think or believes what we believe and forget them, right?
That's happening in society today, right?
Yeah. Oh, I think so. Yeah. Or are we going to figure out a way, which is the harder path usually, is to figure out a way to actually talk to that other person and put ourselves in their shoes enough to understand. We may never agree with them, but if we can at least understand where they're coming from and why they think what they think or what they believe, then that helps us figure out how to talk to them, because we'll know what matters to them and what's important to them and why they're coming at us the way they're coming at us, right? And so it helps us move the conversation forward instead of just shutting everything down.
The concept of collaboration is almost like a catchword a lot with the younger. I mean, you know, the generation younger than myself. I find myself engaging a lot with them in what I do, and that collaboration, and that's I got hope for that because they kind of get it. Now the collaboration may be all virtual or combination virtual in person. I don't know, but they're collaborating, and we might not be anymore. Our generation may be pulling back. I don't know exactly, but it's fascinating to me that the collaboration is still the essence of getting together and doing things together and working together. I don't think that's lost on society, but it's our ineffectiveness to talk to each other, which is the problem as I see it. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah, it's a big stumbling block for a lot of us. I think there is a huge push to develop even more collaborative environments.
Okay.
I see that in the school setting, as my daughter's moving through her education, there's a lot of group work and collaboration that the kids are working on. It's not, here's your assignment, Timmy, go work on it on your own at home.
Right.
It's, let's get these 3 or 4 kids together and create one project as a group. So I definitely...
That's hopeful, though.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And the employers that I talk to are also looking for employees who are able to collaborate when called upon to do it, right? Maybe not every project is going to involve this big group coming together with weekly meetings, but a lot of the work is collaborative in nature. And so some of us are kind of rusty, with how to do that. And some of us aren't naturally inclined to collaborate either. I think we all have sort of our own instinctive tendencies, and some of us tend to work more independently if given a choice. We don't necessarily spend a lot of time collaborating if left to our own devices.
Right.
And so when we're called upon to do that, how do I do it? How do I have that conversation with my teammate without making them roll their eyes in the back of their head, right? So that's the kind of work that I can come in and hopefully help folks do, is recognize those differences that people have, appreciate those differences, and then navigate them.
Okay, let's talk about that. So how do you do that? Because that's such a tall order.
It is a tall order.
A tall order.
Yeah, yep. And so we go back to basics often.
Okay, so what does that involve?
Yeah, it involves taking a deep dive into listening, which sounds...
Novel idea.
Yeah, exactly, right? It sounds so basic and so simple. And on one hand, it is, right? We go through our day-to-day lives hearing what's going on around us. But when we're having a conversation with someone, especially if there's any kind of tension or disagreement, or there's a problem or an issue that we're trying to solve, often what happens is the mental chatter in our own brains gets in our way, and we stop really listening, and we start preparing our rebuttal to what the other person, what we think the other person is bringing to the table. But if we're not really listening to what they're saying, then we're not actually getting what they're bringing to the table, because we're over here planning our next 3
You can
statements.
almost see it sometimes too when you're having a conversation, and you could be getting to the point of what you're saying, and then you can see the eyes will go, and then that's when they're formulating the response. They're listening to respond as opposed to listening to understand, or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So we go back to basics with listening. We explore that. We go into more detail, dive in, get some practice doing it, if the time allows. We'll also talk about body language.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Yeah,
let's do that.
Which is it is very fascinating. And sometimes we forget to clue into that piece of it when we're having a conversation. Again, because we've got our agenda, right? We're coming in, we've got to get these 3 points across, we've got to say these 8 things, right? And we've got to win. Sometimes we come in with that as our agenda.
Of course.
Right.
Of course.
And so sometimes we approach those conversations like a steamroller, right? And just barrel through, try to get through it to the end without watching how the other person is reacting and trying to read the impact and not only reading the impact, but making adjustments on the fly based on what we're seeing, right? So it's just reminding people, on some level we all know this, right? But
do we? Because I don't think some people do.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. You're probably right. So it's either introducing the idea to folks who are new to it, or it's reminding folks, oh yeah, right? Like facial expressions will tell you a lot.
Right.
Posture will tell you a lot. If I say to you, Eric, I'm fine.
And you're always having your arms crossed when you do.
Right. That's the example I always give because it's very broad and obvious, right?
Of course, yeah.
And we've probably all had that conversation at one point or another in our lives, right? How are you doing? Oh, fine. Or the other way to say it could be, no, I'm fine. Yeah, sure, fine. Of course, everything's fine. Is it? Nope. Right? And if I was paying attention to that person's expression, tone of voice, posture, all those things, I would know that.
Right.
And then I get to decide, am I going to follow up with that? And hopefully I will, right? Well, actually, it doesn't sound like things are fine. Do you want to tell me what's really going on? Sort of taking the chance to open the door.
Okay.
Be a little vulnerable, perhaps. Or we can continue on our steamroll path, and just barrel through. Oh, she said she was fine. Okay, great. Here's these 8 things I needed to tell her and see you later. Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of diving down into those really fundamental pieces of communication and encouraging people to pay attention to the other person, to kind of get out of our own what we want to get out of it.
Right. Selfish listening.
A little bit, yeah. And of course, we do need things. We do want to accomplish things.
Right.
We can't put those completely to the side. But when we allow space for the other person to have an effect on us and what we're thinking, what we're saying, how we're communicating with them in the moment, that's when we build those connections. And if you've got a teammate, you need to have those kinds of bonds of trust in order to get the work done, for it not to be painful to get out of bed and go to work every day, right? So they'll have your back when you've got a crisis that you're trying to deal with and you need their help and you ask them to pitch in. Those are the benefits. And I try to help people see that this isn't just an exercise just for the point of, trying to sharpen some skills. There's some real benefits.
Got it.
On a pretty selfish level, right? Like, it's going to make my life easier if I've put in the time to build this with this other person.
There's part of me that wants to believe that our brains have changed, because that's the only way I can explain it, Kathi. It's almost like in this short 8-10 year window where we really have concentrated into a virtual communication with text and the visual screen. That, because I'm guilty, and I'm in the field where I love the communication with humans. I love this interaction.
Yeah.
And to give that up, which society takes you in that direction with the reliance upon screens all day, all the time, or our choice to use them.
Yeah. Right.
I just think we're changing the way, and I'm not coming at it as a doctor, but it sounds like we're changing, like, cognitively, what our norm is for communication, and we may be losing the skill set that we might have had prior. I remember Anthony Robbins, again, to bring that name up, he had something in a book once called modeling. It was advice for salespeople, and you would model the person you were trying to speak with, their
Oh,
tone,
yeah.
whatever phrase that is. He used modeling.
Okay.
I use chameleon because
Yeah.
as a salesperson, you were trying to make them comfortable, and they would open up more if they would read your body language as being comforting to them and all
Yeah.
that stuff. Is that also things that is wrapped up in your work?
Yeah, I've
Fascinating.
Heard, yeah, fascinating. I've heard mirroring.
Mirroring.
As the
Maybe he said mirror. I thought it was modeling.
it very well could be modeling.
Okay.
But yeah, it's that idea of trying to match the
Without
person.
creeping them out, right? Because you want to do you're emulating every move they make, and
Right.
that can go wrong real quick.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I've come across that idea as well,
Okay.
and building rapport, especially in like a sales kind of situation. I think that
Right.
idea of mirroring can be very effective. People feel like, oh, they get me, and it's all happening on an unconscious level, right?
Right.
People aren't actually thinking these things as they're happening, but they instinctively respond to someone who seems to be very similar.
It works. I can remember trying
Yeah?
it as a younger person.
Okay.
And it's funny you crossed your arms earlier because
Yeah.
I remember going into an early sales call, very green I was, and crossing my arms, but being very pleasant. Like the gentleman was standoff. I crossed my arms, but then verbally was pleasant, and it just kind of worked. I'm like, wow, this stuff really kind of applied. Actually may work. But then I just started incorporating it, and then if you find the skill, you can use it obviously in your personal life. It's just effectively, right?
Oh yeah, sure. And I talk about that when I'm talking about this with folks, is that this works in the office, but it works at home too, right? All these skills, we've probably all had what I call the dishes argument. And it might not be specifically about dishes. Usually in my house it is about dishes. But in other people's houses, maybe it's about laundry on the floor or towels that don't get hung up in the bath. You know, whatever it is in that particular house, we've probably all had the argument about it, right? So there's a technique called an I statement.
Okay.
Which I often talk about with folks, especially if we're talking about conflict management, conflict resolution. And it's a way to talk about issues or problems, hopefully minimizing the defensiveness in the other person when you bring up whatever the issue or the problem is,
The
right?
towels.
The towels, the dishes, right? So if I just needed to say something about the dirty dishes piled in the sink, I could say something like, you should do the dishes. You said you'd do the dishes. Why don't you ever do the dishes? You know, some variation of that, which is the verbal equivalent of wagging my finger in the other person's face.
Okay.
And that's happening because I'm using the word you. It's your fault, you're wrong, you're bad. That's kind of the unspoken message that feels, if I'm on the receiving end of that, it feels terrible.
Like a personal attack almost.
Personal attack. It feels like I'm being blamed or shamed. And I'm going to probably have a knee-jerk defensive reaction. Right? Like, well, maybe I didn't do the dishes, but you didn't put the laundry away, right? And then we're off to the races, right?
Yes.
We've gone to DEFCON 6 right away. And the option or the opportunity to resolve what the problem actually is gone, right? And we're probably going to have a bigger mess to clean up in the end anyway, because we've just had this argument and we said things that we regret and all those pieces that go along with it.
Right.
So instead, we can use an I statement,
Okay.
which is just talking about our feelings or our experiences of the problem without trying to make the other person feel bad.
Give me an example.
So the dishes. Instead of saying, you should have done the dishes, why didn't you do the dishes? I could say, I feel frustrated when the dishes are left in the sink.
Okay.
And it's not a magic bullet, right? The other person might still feel a little defensive because they know they probably did something wrong, right? So it's not a perfect solution, and it's not that everything's always going to be hearts and flowers. Whenever
It's not.
No. But what we're trying to do is prevent DEFCON 6 from happening.
Sure.
Right. And of course, the other piece of it is going back to our nonverbals. You can say anything sarcastically. So I could say, I feel really frustrated when the dishes are left in the sink.
Got
and
it.
It's an I statement, but it's still
It's
gonna
antagonistic.
It's like that verbal meh. So we have to watch our nonverbals when we're talking, obviously. But I like to introduce this idea of I statements to folks because I've found that when I make the choice to use them, it helps.
Okay.
It really does help. We at least get to have the conversation most of the time.
So you're instead of, by using the word you, it's accusatory.
A little bit. Yeah. It feels like.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So,
okay. I like
just
that.
a little strategy.
I like that.
You could try to use next time.
The towels.
Yeah, the towels.
Yes.
Yep. There you go.
Besides being antagonistic in your conversation, what other mistakes are we making? I mean, let's just say every day.
Yeah. I think a pretty common one is coming into a conversation with a lot of assumptions.
Okay. I mean, you mean in today's society? I mean, how could that possibly happen?
No.
That doesn't happen, right?
No, that never happened. No, not in 2020.
No.
So I actually had this happen, and it was kind of a light bulb moment for me. I was working with someone on a team on a project, and talk about the barriers of having a lot of virtual communication.
Mm-hmm.
Everything up until that point had been done over email with this person, right? And when we finally got together in person, face to face, to talk about next steps and what are we doing here, we started talking about this document that had gone back and forth. And he was saying some things about it, and I was so perplexed. I really had no idea why he was coming at our conversation the way he was coming at it, because the document I had read didn't say those things and didn't give me that feeling. And you ever have those conversations where you're mentally trying to keep up with, like, you feel like your brain is 3 steps behind what's happening in real time? Okay. This was one of those moments for me. Like, I was scrambling, mentally. I was like, what's going on here? And I was perplexed and a little frustrated, which was coming out in my tone and probably my facial,
Sure.
And he was mirroring, right? He was responding. It was kind of escalating a little bit. And we got into this argument. Well, I think we should do it this way because the thing said this. No, I think we should because... And finally, I stopped for a second because I don't know how it happened, but a light bulb went off and I said, which version did you read? And he told me, and I was like, that's why, right? We literally were not on the same page.
Right, literally. Not on the same page. Mm-hmm.
And I had walked in, as had he, to this conversation, assuming that we were talking about this single thing. We weren't.
Okay.
Once we cleared that up, the argument evaporated. We were able to, move forward. Everything went fine after that, right? And the relationship was repaired. But it was just that idea of not checking in with him at the start of the conversation. Right. So did you read that email from Tuesday? Like, just asking would have saved all of that mess that we had. So I think we make that mistake I know I do, make that mistake all the time of walking in to a conversation thinking we have all the facts, thinking we know what the other person wants or needs, thinking we know what the other person's intentions are. And when we start from that place of being sure of what we know without being willing to adjust or ask or approach things from a place of curiosity and open-mindedness, that's when we get ourselves in trouble.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating because I get it. It's very apparent to me in observation when I listen to any politician, forget last night, anyone who has a real overt belief or stated belief that supposedly is driving everything they do and everything they say, as opposed to listening to a man or woman of science, a physicist or an astrophysicist, someone who's dealing in big, broad concepts. Yeah. It's refreshing to listen to those folks. Even someone that believes in aliens or someone that it will go to an area of curiosity. Mm-hmm. It's refreshing. Even if the subject is completely 180 from where I'm at, that kind of conversation is wonderful because it's based on curiosity. Yep. Even if the subject's not that great compared to everything else we're seeing now, of everybody being so set and resolute and not willing to open their mind up to even any kind of point of view.
Right.
I don't really understand how you can even do what you do. It's got to be incredibly difficult in today's society. I mean, you talked about a team, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll throw a scenario and then you tell me how you would handle it.
Okay.
So we have a team for our company XYZ, and we have in this team let's just say we pulled from different departments. We actually have a personnel department or a human resource department person. We got a couple engineers. Mm-hmm. We have the salespeople that are going to deliver this, and then we have the marketing people who are going to advertise it. And all of these, so advertising, marketing, sales, and the human resources person in this group. Mm-hmm. And we're starting on product development from scratch. Mm. They're just not going to play nice in that group, right? Let's throw a couple of accountants in there too. Like or financial analysts. I mean, you have all these different demographics.
Yep. And
because we're already kind of deficient in our communication anyways, being a lot of it's screen related, it has to be, before the screen dominant society, it was almost manageable when we actually had to get in the same room and talk. But you're going to put people in the same room that may never actually be in the same room with anybody, let alone people from different departments. Like, I don't know where do you even begin with that?
Right. So where I would start if I were tasked with bringing that team together would be to have them complete a personality style assessment.
Okay. Like
Myers-Briggs, DISC, predictive index. There's lots of different.
For our listeners and for our viewers that are not familiar with those two, what is the essence of those two tests?
They're a series of questions that folks answer, and based on the responses that people choose, they're sort of categorized into whatever that assessment system is. I think Myers-Briggs has 16 different qualities.
Quadrant or something?
Yeah, DISC has 4 quadrants. That's what I like to use DISC because it's simpler. It's got a nice fun acronym of DISC.
It does.
Yeah. So
do you plot them out on the quadrants? Is that how it works? 4 quadrant, and you plot where you are in a certain quadrant. You lean.
Yes. Okay. So your tendencies when faced with this kind of a sales kind of situation, or a collaborative team kind of situation, what's your instinct?
Okay.
And it's not that any of them are better, any of the styles are better than any of the others.
Right.
They all have their strengths and they all have their weaknesses, or things to be aware of as, okay, this is my tendency as I'm more of a diplomat style in the DISC quadrant. And so I have to be on my toes if there is a conflict happening, because my natural instinct will be to pretend it's not happening.
Okay.
Right? Sort of, let's avoid this and see if it resolves itself.
Kind of like the United Nations.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So, that's my style.
Yeah.
And so I feel like these assessments, and I've taken several over decades, and I always feel like, how did they know that about me when I get the results back, right? And
I get it.
yeah, I think most folks have that reaction. I mean,
Science,
right? They're not 100%. And of course, every context is different, right? Just because I'm naturally a diplomat, if you put me in a specific situation where I have to take a more hardline, definitive, we're doing it this way, it's my way or the highway.
Right.
I don't know what that situation would be, but if you
Right.
put me in that situation, I can do that,
Like
right?
we're adaptable.
Right. And we all have free will, right? Yeah. Just because I'm naturally a diplomat doesn't mean I can't behave outside of that, right?
Yeah.
But it's just a way to sort of give you a snapshot of what your habits and tendencies are, which is, I think, incredibly helpful, because the more we know about ourselves, the more we can figure out what we want to change or what we want to work on, or what our strengths are, and put
Right.
ourselves in situations where we can shine more often.
You would do that at first,
Yes.
so everybody can have like a kind of like a roadmap of where they are now,
Yeah.
as
Yep.
opposed to what maybe your counterparts are.
Right. And the other piece of those assessments is often, okay, here's your style. Here's what your results are. Here's how someone with your results typically interacts with people with these other styles.
Got it.
And so it was a light bulb, another light bulb moment for me decades ago. The second time I took one of these personality assessments was at an employer. The whole office, it was a small office, about 12 of us, took this assessment. And then as a group, we had a facilitator come in and sort of walk us through. And it was a total light bulb moment for me, because the person I'd been having a lot of trouble relating to, like, she made me really nervous.
Okay.
I would get really tense if I had to go talk to her, sort of biting my nails, because she was very direct, to the point, call it as she saw it, right?
Okay.
Not a ton of tact, right? She is an emotional person, but she would rather tell you what she thinks than take care of your feelings. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that was her
Where was
approach.
she on the quadrant? I'm thinking,
My complete opposite,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's why, right? Because everything about her style is 180 degrees from how I approach life. And that's probably also why I feel like I drive her crazy, right?
Sure.
Because when I go up
Sure.
and I talk to her, I love the details. I love getting down in the weeds. I'll pull together a PowerPoint with 30 bullet points on it that walks you through every single step. She is a 30,000 foot big picture person. So me spending 45 minutes explaining every single thought behind my decision made her crawl the walls, right? And I could pick up, I didn't know why I was driving her crazy, but I knew I was driving her crazy.
Right.
Until we had this conversation about the style. And then I was like, oh, that's why. That's why. So there's this idea of the platinum rule.
Okay.
Have you heard this?
No.
So the golden rule,
Right.
which you've probably heard,
Yeah.
is treat other people the way you want to be treated.
Right.
Right. So the platinum rule kind of flips that on its head and
Okay.
says, treat other people the way they want to be treated. Meaning
Okay.
that person who is my opposite in this instance, right? Who likes the 30,000 foot view, who wants quick action oriented decisions. She doesn't want to drag things out. If I approach her and behave more like her in that interaction, it's not that I'm a tiger trying to change my stripes, right? I'm still that diplomat who wants
Right.
the 30 bullet points,
Right.
right? But in that moment, in that conversation, I can act more like her,
Okay.
and we'll have an easier time talking because I'm approaching her the way she appreciates being approached.
Mm-hmm.
So in that hypothetical team you were describing, all those people, I can imagine they're all coming with different styles.
Sure.
And without this information or awareness, they're probably going to run into the same problems that she and I
Okay.
had, right? All these
Right.
clashes, and they're not going to know why there's the tension or the conflict happening, but it's
Okay.
happening. So I would start by having them learn about this so that it's not that they're going to change their styles or we're asking them to change their styles, but they can figure out, oh, okay, I have to go talk to Harry, the accountant. I'm Sally, the bubbly HR person who loves chit chat and small talk. Harry hates that. So I'm not going to go in and, I'll say, hey, how you doing? But I'm not then going to ask him a bunch of personal questions or because that's going to make him uncomfortable and
Right.
pull back.
Right.
So yeah, that's how I would tackle
so
working with those folks.
You're saying that you want to make sure that everybody's aware of their own self-awareness the best you can anyways.
Yeah.
So give me an example of an exercise or one of the early exercises you would do to get them to interact and maybe not only understand their own self-awareness, but like get an example of how they butt up against each other.
So sometimes I've done a couple of different things.
Okay.
When I've gone into company, I like to do fun things. With folks. So there's an activity I've done with folks where I'll break them up into teams,
Okay.
and they have to build half of a bridge with their team.
Okay.
Using pipe cleaners.
Okay.
Yeah. And the goal is then their half of the bridge has to link up with the other team's half over, I usually just pull two chairs, about a couple feet apart. The bridges have to link up, attach somehow to the chairs and link up in the middle.
Okay.
And then I bring a stuffed animal. And the bridge needs to bear the weight
Right.
of the stuffed animal without it breaking through. So this gives
Can you
them...
put salespeople in to do something like that?
Well, it's fascinating to watch the groups work
Okay.
because it's this little microcosm, right? They've got a problem to solve
Okay.
within their own group of building half of this structure. So how are we going to do that? You see almost always someone steps up and takes the lead right away and starts directing the other people what to do. But then the other half of the problem is they need to communicate with the other team
Okay.
to ensure that their bridge halves can actually link
Connect.
up
Okay.
and connect
Okay.
and bear the weight of this. So often what happens, I try not to give too much direction because I just want them to experience it and then we debrief it afterwards. But what often happens, I never say it's a competition. I am very explicit about the fact that these halves need to link. The stuffy
Right.
needs to sit on top.
Right.
But the teams default almost automatically to being competitive with each other.
Interesting.
Yeah. So someone may come over and say, what are you guys doing? What's your half look like? And often what will happen, they'll turn and you can't see,
Really?
it's fun.
Really?
They're having fun with
Sure,
it,
sure.
right? There's a lot of laughter usually going on in the room too.
But the competitiveness is there
Yeah.
from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
And almost a refusal to help the other
Really?
side, right? Even though their goal ultimately is a large group goal. So then we talk about that afterwards, right?
Right.
And that's very much like a business. You've got your marketing team, you've got your sales team, you've got your accounting team. There's these smaller subgroups.
They're all parochial.
Yeah, they're sort of in their little towers often, and viewing the other towers not necessarily as enemies, but not as teammates.
Got it.
Right? There's
Why is that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
Some things just are.
yeah, some things just are. Maybe it's just human nature, and maybe there isn't a really explicit, consistent conversation going on coming sort of from the top down about we're one organization, right? All of the work that each of these teams is doing, ultimately, we're trying to make the whole thing succeed.
Got it.
Right? So when this group over here refuses to provide the information to this group over here until the last minute, just because we can, there's often like a power dynamic going on there. Information's power.
And also, like you said, maybe a poorly executed message from the top on what the goals for the company are.
Yeah, if people can't articulate that or don't feel like there is something larger that they're contributing to, then of course they're going to focus on the smaller thing that's right in front of them because they can see the impact that or they feel it, or it's much more apparent that their effort is towards something, but that the larger picture might be harder to grasp.
Right.
And they don't necessarily see the connection between what I'm doing over here in accounting and how XYZ company had its best year ever, right? Like not knowing how that connects, I think gets in a lot of our way.
From years in corporate America for myself, and there was about 15 years there before I did my own thing. As a younger person in an older workforce is kind of like generally where I found myself. And which was an eye-opening and probably really fun, really fun. It did seem to me, it was pretty apparent though, that salespeople, I'll lump the marketing people somewhat in that group, were viewed almost with disdain from a lot of the line positions, whether it was accounting, whether it was engineering. They didn't even make an attempt. There was the salespeople and the marketing people. All they want to do is spend money, and they make all the big money anyways. They get paid for doing nothing, of course, and that's how the engineers and the people that worked inside would view them, and the salespeople would view the other people as being, well, all they think about is control, and they won't budge, and they won't understand that the customer needs this. And there was just that nature where, because their functions were different, Kathi, they used that as a reason to not communicate or even try to communicate.
Yeah.
Does that sound like the symptom?
Yeah, I think so. And so I think part of it, too, could be, again, if it's coming more from the top, but if there are more opportunities given to having those cross-functional...
There wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So I do some work with team building and leadership development, too, for managers. And so there's always a conversation about building diverse teams, right? And bringing different people with different skill sets, different backgrounds to the table. It's going to be harder in the short run because you do have to navigate these different styles and these... they have to
be managed. The team has to be managed.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of benefit because you're not only going to have a better outcome because you've had people coming at the problem or the project from all these different sides and perspectives. Hopefully you've gotten a pretty complete picture and lots of different ideas to pick from, right? You can pick the best.
Right.
But you're also building these relationships and the trust, right? So when Harry in accounting goes back to accounting after wrapping up the work on this project, he can be like, oh yeah, Sally in marketing, she's actually pretty cool, right? They have this shared history. They have this level of trust now between each other. And so when Sally and the marketing department put their budget forward for the next year, Harry, instead of immediately, getting his hackles up, Harry can be like, oh, I can go ask her about this, right? I'm not sure where this is coming from, right? It's just it shifts some perspectives, I think, or it can.
Well, I think It also probably provides a human connection there that might not have been there before.
Yeah.
Which
absolutely.
is the gateway to any communication, right? I mean, if these people have to communicate, but they don't really know each other, or they're fearful of each other, or they just don't like each other.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It just impedes.
It does.
Costs money, impedes work, impedes the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. The more we can get to know our teammates, not that we need to know people's deepest, darkest secrets or their entire life stories, but the more we can get to know them as people versus simply the job responsibilities that they have, the function that they play within the company, I think the better for everybody. It's just going to make the work easier in the end. You're not going to have those repeated roadblocks or challenges coming up because Harry can go talk to Sally, right? Without feeling awkward or weird about it.
Yeah. Mid-'80s, I think, when I first entered the workforce, with a company called Roadway, became RPS, which became FedEx, but it was a transportation company, very rigid, old school, massive company, and they were going to try something new. And then the thing that was new at the time was a book by Tom Peters, In Search of Excellence. It was really a title shift in what corporate training became. And it happened in the 80s, but it really had a lot to do with listing. Fascinating book. And then to me, the history of that whole companies getting in touch with themselves and getting more employee centric and all that stuff was all great. And then there was a minutia of that for a decade or so. And then from your observation, has there been periods of time where companies wanted to rush through this stuff, and then maybe the economy changes and then they pull away from it for a while, they don't need it, then they come back? Is it constantly a roller coaster, do you think?
I think it does tend to have a bit of a roller coaster cycle.
Okay.
To
what
it.
changes that? Do you think it's the economy?
I do think the economy plays a pretty large role in that, because if budgets need to be cut, often learning and development is something that can pretty painlessly or seemingly painlessly, right? Go.
Okay.
Until things pick back up, and then learning and development gets put back in.
So you're saying their companies are willing to do it when they have the excess money to spend it?
I think so. Yeah.
Which should be reversed.
It's a little short-sighted. Yeah. Right. Yeah, because if they're spending a lot of resources putting out fires, hiring because they've got a lot of turnover because people are unhappy, morale's in the toilet, right? Those kinds of things. It's a cost. It's not an upfront cost. You don't see it until maybe hindsight. Oh, look at all the people we lost last year. Must be something going on. But yeah, I think if the investment were made upfront more often, then the savings would be more apparent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your work, I can see a direct correlation between not only intra-company, but how people that touch their customers interact with their customers too.
Yeah.
I don't like the word salespeople person, but that function, the sales function, but not only just in sales. You mentioned off camera with me when you put together a salesperson and maybe an engineer to go out to work on a certain application for a potential or a current customer. Sometimes if those two employees aren't getting along or are on the same page, the salesperson probably has their own goals involved. The engineer is kind of along for the ride and might be begrudgingly there anyways, right?
Right.
That has to be. Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. Or what sometimes happens too is folks with that more technical background or expertise are brought in as the experts, right, to sort of explain what's happening or what the proposal is.
Okay.
But they default to their tech speak, right? They assume that everybody else, here come assumptions again, right? They assume that everybody understands all the jargon, the lingo, the acronyms, or that anybody cares, right? If they're like me, sort of detail oriented, they like the 30 bullet points.
Right.
Maybe that potential client, they just want the 30,000 foot. Tell me what the benefit is.
Got it.
Right.
You think that'd be the salesperson's job to have that relationship established so they kind of knew up front and would help the engineer say, hey, this is a no nonsense. Even if you use like term like no nonsense, say, he loves to talk, or she wants to give you 10 minutes and not a minute more. You better get right to the point.
Right.
But that communication doesn't happen ahead of time often, does it?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That connection isn't there. Or, the person who is the more technical person, maybe they're terrified or nervous, right? And they don't go on these kinds of calls, or they're not in these meetings very often. So when they are, they're really out of their element. And so when we're out of our element, we fall back on what we feel comfortable with, right? What we know. Right. So even if there had been that conversation ahead of time, like in the moment, when faced with a sea of people I don't know that I'm trying to convince, logic does it, right? All these details will convince them that this is, but really, no, they don't necessarily want that.
Yeah, see, being on the expressive side, when we had these meetings together, Kathi, I would look to my engineering friends or my analysts or my accounting people and say, why the flip don't you get it? We're going in there to talk about our customer service department dropping the ball. We're going to smooth and we're going to put some new systems in place for them. It all makes sense to me. Why can't you be my backbone and tell them how we're going to do this?
Right.
But man, they just don't. They didn't see the same vision.
Right.
I don't know. There's probably more to it than that, but it was really frustrating until I would take the moment to manage later in my career and go, wow, were you short-sighted and looking at it that myopically?
Yeah. It all comes back, I think, again, to sort of our personal styles, our own perspective that we bring to the table. And when we're able to take off the blinders, when we're able to sort of sit down for a moment, approach it with some curiosity, maybe even try to put ourselves in the headspace for a moment of whoever this person who has a very different take on it from us. And why would he think it was a good idea in a sales call to do all these things? Oh, maybe he was terrified, right? And that may not be what the answer actually is, but when we start to think about the reasons behind people's behavior, that's when we can start to come up with some solutions or some strategies to help guide the conversation. The next time we're going out on a sales call together, Harry, how about let's craft your 3-sentence elevator pitch. I'll help you with that, right? Let's start brainstorming. What do you think the key pieces are that we need to say? Harry says, okay, let's massage it, let's tweak it, right? And working together, you bring the best of both worlds, right? You've got the technical know-how, you've got the people, interpersonal skills, bring them together, voila, right? But it takes a little bit of that behind the scenes. I think it takes a little bit of that behind the scenes prep
some
work,
humility too from one part of it. And this is embarrassing to share this with you, but you will get a chuckle out of this. I want to tell you. Long story short, I was a salesperson. I had a problem with a client. I took the lead engineer of this company out, said, I need help on this because we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and I need you to show them how we're going to connect that way and show them why that's better. We go out there and I do my thing, and then I say, and I have Bill here, and Bill's going to show you how easy it is for us to connect direct from our company to yours, and this is going to make things better. And we're driving, and it worked, and we're driving home, and I said, that was great. He goes, that's not going to make things better. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, if you had come to me, this is what he told me, if you had come to me and told me the problem, instead of putting your own solution together, we have a couple other options that are probably a better fit. And boy, I'll tell you what, the human humility of learning that, I wasn't willing to listen. I didn't even think to listen to them. I just wanted them to fix the problem and not mess things up in the appointment. And wow. And and I didn't do it with any malice. It was
Yeah, right.
just, you just go through your day thinking you assume you know it all.
Yeah.
Wow, I got taken to school there.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
I still remember it. From
Yeah.
all those years. That
Yeah.
was 25 years ago.
Okay. But what a valuable lesson. I mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've had similar experiences where I got sort of taken to task because, and again, no malice on my part. It was almost, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Until somebody pointed it out to me. Oh, you mean I should have talked to so-and-so. Oh, of course. Perfect sense now. Hindsight's
I probably
always.
thought I couldn't. I probably in my head thought I can't talk to them.
Yeah.
I can't even intellectually talk to them on their level. I'm not even going to try. Which that was
Yeah.
ridiculous. I mean, of course you can, right?
Yeah. It can be intimidating for sure when somebody has that level of expertise and an expertise that is so not how my brain works, right? It can feel, I think, very intimidating to try to feel like I've got to keep up with them in this conversation. I'm not prepared. I don't have the tools. I don't know what I'm talking about, right? But to your point about humility, I think if we're able to say, you know what, I definitely don't have the background that you do. I know this much about it. Please tell me. And kind of coming at it from that place of curiosity and humility. Yeah.
And everybody wins then, to me, instead of going it alone, because pretending that you know something and you're not really sure about, no one wins out of that.
Right.
Sometimes it takes many years in your life before you figure that out.
Yeah.
But
Right.
Outside of business, to our listeners and our viewers, can you give us a couple, I don't know, a couple of good ideas in to improve our ability just to listen to anyone we're communicating with? Because I'm sure we I'm so guilty, and I try to be my own worst critic, whether it's this show, it's my career, to analyze the way I communicate. And I step over people constantly, and I rush my words. I don't enunciate. I don't even know if I'm being heard on the other side often the way I intend, or what I intend to express, which is a huge problem. So is there anything we can do, just normal everyday things, or things we could possibly shift in the way we listen, or the way, or anything that would improve communication?
Yeah. So I'm thinking of a couple of things.
Okay.
One would be to ask more open-ended questions.
Meaning.
So the opposite of it is a close-ended question. Did you drive here today?
That's a yes.
Yes, right. A close-ended question is asking for a very short, probably one word, maybe yes or no kind of response. You're not going to get much information from the person with a close-ended question. If you ask an open-ended question, though, you could say something like, how was your drive here today?
Okay.
Right? So it's a subtle shift, but it's opening the door and asking for more from the other person. And so there are often questions that start with how or why. Why did you make that choice? Instead of, your choice was bad, right? When we
got that.
Because we don't actually know yet
Right.
why you made the choice until we ask. Otherwise, all we're doing is coming at you with our own assumptions. And we could be completely wrong.
Right.
About
often we are.
Yeah. So asking open-ended questions, or even, this isn't really a question, but just the statement of, tell me more about that. Especially if you didn't get much out of the person at first. And some people are more, they keep things closer to their chest, right? There's often more technical or analytical people. They might not volunteer a ton of information right out of the gate. So asking these kinds of open-ended questions, tell me more about that. Can help draw that out, to make sure we're on the same page, to make sure we're not making incorrect assumptions, to give us guidance about what the next steps in the conversation should be.
Do we, ask more closed-ended questions? Do you think because society's just at a faster pace now, we're trying to grab more information quickly? I don't know. Do we tend to ask those types of questions more often now?
I'm not sure. I think a lot of us just kind of default to it because, and again, it's just my 2 cents, but I think maybe we already think we know the answer.
How many times do we ask questions that we assume we already know the answer? That's a good point.
Yeah. So I think there have been several touchstones that we keep coming back to in our conversation today, but that idea of being curious, if we start from that place as much as we can, we're going to have better communication with the other person for all of the reasons that you and I have just been talking about.
Just information gathering, period, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't look at it that way, but the curiosity part of life that's a whole other discussion. But I mean, I can't imagine going through my life and not being curious about everything, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it makes things a lot more fun.
Certainly.
You discover things you never would have known about, or pieces of a person's past that you never would have known.
Right.
It just brings so much flavor and color, I think, to life, instead of just always going through life with our heads down and our blinders on and the steamroller, I know what I'm talking about, and having that sort of very rigid, definitive, I am the expert kind of stance.
Right.
Yeah.
And you would think, on the face of it, those who were in the quadrants, whether it was DISC or Myers-Briggs? Myers-Briggs, excuse me. I'm not dyslexic. If you take those two, you would think an expressive style person would find all that easier than maybe someone who's an analyst or maybe more closed together. But the bottom line is, if the expressive just talks and can't listen, then they're really at more of a disadvantage than those who are a little more guarded.
Yeah,
wouldn't
perhaps.
they be?
Yeah, right. I think that's a really interesting way to frame it. I've never necessarily thought of it that way before. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, that the person who is maybe really talkative, really bubbly, having a lot of fun, but not necessarily allowing space or time for the other person to chime in, or when they do, paying much attention to it, they're probably at a bit of a loss, right? Because they don't have the same information that the quieter, more introverted, more observational person might have. There's that book Susan Cain wrote a while ago called Introvert.
Okay.
It's sort of it's fascinating. And I think a lot of us can be one way in one situation and the other way in a different, in some situations I'm much more extroverted, in others I'm much more introverted. But her whole thesis is there's a lot of power to be found in a more introverted style.
Okay.
Right. And I think because sometimes, again, we've talked about this earlier, sometimes the louder voice gets more attention, or finds themselves in the spotlight more often.
Right.
But the introvert has spent a lot of time thinking about whatever the issue or the topic is. They have been paying attention to what's been going on. They've been observing a lot. They just may not have spoken it out loud. And when we're able to tap into that kind of wisdom that those folks can bring, right? They may not want to be the person to do the TED Talk or to be the face of the project at the big stakeholder meeting, but they can really help you get there.
So that's funny you said that. I used to have a manager who used to make the following joke to me. He would say, "You want to solve the problems in this company, put hidden microphones at the lunch table of the engineering group." because they will be a little more comfortable talking to each other
Yep.
and reveal more of what's really happening in the company, but still have that really factual. That's the group right there that can solve this group's problems, but this group won't listen to them.
Right.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, that's kind
totally.
of horrifying. What about for clients in general? Just I know we talked about modeling or metering a little bit. Any other for our folks out there that are salespeople that do if you do still do face-to-face sales, or if you're doing telesales or I guess Zoom calls or whatever, because there's still that interaction.
There is.
Or talk a little bit about the differences now, what you're seeing and what we're moving toward as to what we're face-to-face.
Right. Yeah, I think with so much happening through technology, what we miss are the nonverbal aspects of communication. Even on Zoom, you don't miss it as much on Zoom because unless the person has their camera turned off, you can see them.
Right.
But I think it's really important to tune in as much as we can to those nonverbal signals that people are giving us. And when it's just an email or a text, you don't have any of that. So I always caution folks who do a significant amount of their professional communication just by typing. You have to be really careful with what you say and how you say it. You also have to be careful when you're on the receiving end of, again, not making assumptions until you clear things up. Because we've all probably gotten that text or that email that we're like, what? Why would they say that to me? Right? And sometimes the person really is saying that to you, but other times they meant something else.
Right.
But it just didn't come across. And if we'd said it face to face with me being able to hear them, see them,
right,
it would have landed completely differently. So I always caution people, read it over 5 times, write it, let it sit for a day, come back to it with have somebody else take a look at it,
right,
read it out loud. Like there's all these ways. Just be careful, right? Because when we don't have the nonverbals, it's really easy for things to go off the rails.
No doubt, in business and in personal life.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Let's wrap this up by asking this one loaded question.
Okay.
People entering the dating world in their early 20s, and of course those who are re-entering the dating world later in their life, there's a whole new set of challenges today with dating, period. I haven't been dating in 10 years, but when I was, it was an era that Facebook was starting to proliferate, and texting kind of became a thing. Like you really, were expected to communicate by text. I found it very difficult because I was used to face-to-face or actually just having a telephone conversation.
Right.
Today, I can't imagine what my kids are starting to encounter, and heaven forbid, people that are in their 30s and 40s and 50s re-entering a social dating environment where the communication platform has literally gone 180.
Right.
It does not look comfortable, and it looks to me like it's so impersonal, yet the reason you're dating is for personal contact. I don't get it. Like that whole thing. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I feel the exact same way, that I would be completely at a loss if I found myself thrown back into that world, because I think you're absolutely right. It's so, people curate what
Explain that.
Is online. So,
you mean like they create the best version of themselves?
Right,
Okay.
right. So not that
We're all guilty to a degree.
We're all
that,
guilty of that, and not that we don't do that when we're face to face. We always want to put our best face forward, right?
Sure,
But
especially in business.
of course. But when all that you ever see are the happy, positive, wonderful, amazing, throw in whatever superlative you want, right?
Absolutely right.
It gives a very skewed perspective of this person's life. And I feel like it's a lot easier to lie online. Who's going to fact check you, right? I can put out there whatever I want about myself.
And that's a new societal
I think so.
Leap, because it's now prevalent in social media world as opposed to pre-social media world, correct?
I think so. Yeah, not that people didn't lie about their backgrounds and who they are.
There's just so easy now.
It's so easy. Yeah, so I don't know that I have any great advice for folks sort of trying to navigate the virtual dating world, other than be careful and try to have as much face-to-face, or at least phone, actual conversation, as opposed to typing.
Okay.
Because I think it's so much, and maybe it's just my generation. Ask my daughter; she might tell you the complete opposite, right?
Right.
But from my generation, I really kind of struggle to really connect with people if it's just virtually.
Me too. Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
So be careful. Don't believe everything you read or see, and try, if there's any interest at all, I would think having at least voice conversations or Zoom, virtual video conversations, so much better than, because when you get into the text conversation, it's, what did he mean by this? What did she mean by this?
Huge problem.
Oh,
Huge problem. Misinterpret. And it's funny too, like when I was in that world 10 years ago, and I can't imagine what it's like today, but the whole concept of ghosting became a thing, and women were telling me what ghosting was. I had no idea what that was. It just made the ability for people to come in and out of your life so much quicker, because we didn't have to have those previously uncomfortable conversations, right?
Yep. Yeah.
There was no tension on that.
Right. It's a personal pet peeve of mine. It doesn't happen to me very often, but if I text somebody and I don't get a response back, or I send an email and I don't get a response back, just tell me no. I'd rather hear the no than be left in this kind of limbo of wondering. And eventually, when enough time passes, I realize I've gotten my answer, right? It's a no.
It's a cowardly way to go.
But yeah, it is. And it's the harder path to have that uncomfortable conversation.
That was prevalent before social media,
Oh,
though.
yeah.
I mean, it was always been a human condition.
Yeah. Right.
It's just really weird in a virtual world.
Right. And I think it's almost become the norm. It's become expected, from what I understand. Like, if I don't hear from them within 3 days, I mean, then that's it, right? Like, it's just part of, I hate that it's become part of the etiquette, but it feels like it has. We've all just gotten okay with it.
We've gotten lazy in communication. Was that a good way to put it? It's pretty harsh to say that, but I mean, if you look at it, have we gotten lazier with our communication? Maybe we haven't. I don't know.
I'm not, perhaps in some ways lazy. I think maybe, at least in this, the idea of ghosting or, skipping out on uncomfortable conversations, I think it's more that we've discovered this easily accessible escape hatch.
Okay.
And it's super easy to just not respond.
Yeah.
They don't know who I am. They don't know how to get to me. I just don't have to answer my
You're
phone.
shielded almost.
Yeah, a little bit. So I think our innate human, I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want them to be like, those are all, I think, good qualities that we all have. We want to protect feelings.
Sure.
But it's given us, the technology has given us this off-ramp that allows us to just bypass the essential human skill, I think, of having uncomfortable conversations. We don't get a lot of practice with it anymore. And because we don't,
Good point.
because we don't do it very often, when we have to, it's like, oh my, so yeah.
Coming to the house, I saw a couple years ago, I saw my kids, 6, 7, 8 maybe kids in this big great room we have, bunch of furniture, and every one of them on that phone, not looking at each other, and they supposedly were talking to each other, I guess. But as a mid-50s person, I look at that going, this is insane. This is almost like out of a movie, that you're not talking and cutting up and having a good time and laughing. And I don't criticize it because I don't know it. I can't relate to it, but boy, it just seems so impersonal to me.
It feels that way to me too. I see my daughter and kids her age having interactions like that, and it kind of blows my mind. I'm like, you're here with your friend, and yet you're sitting side by side, both on your screens.
I know.
Oh, it's I don't. It really feels wrong to me.
Yeah, wrong is the word to use. I'm glad you said it because I feel exactly the same way. I can't say that to them. I wouldn't say it to them, but but someone my age in the generation that I'm at, it's foreign. It's
so foreign to me. Yeah.
It's and with this show, like many other video podcasts or video web shows, my goal with this show is to be the exact opposite. I say we're the anti-soundbite because I don't want that. I don't even produce these. I'm told I should. I don't produce these like 30-second snippets of each show and then advertise those out. No, I put this out in its entirety. And so far, knock on wood, the viewers are there and the listeners are there. But I really have a bias against all these snippets that we're fed constantly. And that's a whole other issue. But I think we're just getting bombarded with and getting everything from our news to everything in such short spurts.
Yep.
But that human curiosity is there, and that's why whether it's Joe Rogan or Adam Curry or those original podcasters on big formats, they work. It isn't just the guests that they're having, the A-list or the celebrities. I really believe it's people are buying into that long-form conversation, which should tell these manufacturers that there's a need for that.
Yeah.
Because all we're getting is these little...
Right.
We're making some big decisions on our lives based upon really limited information.
Yeah.
Would you not agree?
I do agree. And when we're lacking context and nuance...
On top of that.
Forget it. I mean, you could make anybody say anything if you clip out this 10 seconds or this 30 seconds. But if you don't look at the context in which it was said, it's a small piece of a larger whole.
Welcome to Politics 2020.
Well, yeah.
That's exactly
That's
it.
it.
That's exactly. And we've been building to that as every year has gone by. But I'm horrified of I guess have you seen the fake videos now? Have you seen that?
Right.
The technology's not quite there, but it's getting there.
It's getting there.
Yeah, that's horrifying.
It is.
Because we're going to have some mechanism in place to determine what is actually real. Even our eyes will deceive us. Because before, that's always been kind of like your ears can deceive you. But when you put that visual component in there, you can be completely lied to that you wouldn't be able to distinguish if it's real or not.
I know.
That's frightening.
It's really, yes. I am terrified of that. I'm not a total Luddite. I do have my fair share of technology, but I'm so terrified of the direction I see so much of the media and the way we communicate with each. I see those horrible things in the future, and I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong.
Me too.
But I feel like we've opened Pandora's box with the technology that we have.
No question.
And we have no idea yet what we're in for. Because it could be used for good.
Right.
Or it could be used for selfish.
Which human nature will lead you to believe that there'll always be attempts to use it for greed and lust and power and all the things that the human frailties, right?
Right.
But it's scary technology.
Yeah, right. I totally agree. And all it takes is one bad apple, too.
Mm-hmm. There's
right?
no question about that. We ended on such a negative.
I know.
This was so enjoyable. I can't thank you enough. Definitely come back and see me.
I would love to. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
And for those who own organizations or are management organizations or run organizations who can use this type of training because it's so invaluable, how can people reach you?
Yeah, so they can check out my website, finchcommunications.com. They can email me, Kathi at finchcommunications.com, or they can call 412-423-8395, and I will be happy to talk with them, see what's going on, see if I might be able to help.
Well, we definitely are devoid of conversation and basic communications in business today. That on every level, it's so apparent now. But this, getting two people in the room and talking, is so novel. Although we're delivering it in a technology platform,
right?
The essence of what we're trying to give is, I think, is so real. And thanks for being a part of that.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. This was a lot of fun.
And we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Eric.
All right, you bet. Friends, we are out.